Hi, my name's Jolene. And last month, my sister told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. She said, "Well, pretend we don't know you." At first, I thought it was just another cold shoulder. But then the pictures started disappearing. The money stopped being acknowledged, and somehow my name vanished off the house deed. They called it protecting peace, but whose peace? And what happens when the one they erased decides she's done being quiet? Have you ever been written out of your own family story while you were still alive to watch it happen? I pulled into my driveway just after 6. The sky was rinsed in that deep New Mexico orange, like the sun had one last thing to say but couldn't find the words. I was still wearing my work scrubs greased, a little stale, but that didn't stop me from noticing the envelope sticking out from my mailbox, like it had been waiting all day, just for me. It was thick, cream-colored, the kind people use for weddings or graduations. My name was handwritten in deep blue ink, the cursive looping with the kind of care that made me pause. For a moment, I let myself believe it was something kind, something that meant maybe this year I was included. I held the envelope a little too long before opening it. Inside, a folded card with a watercolor turkey, Callista style all over it, elegant, Pinterest perfect. Thanksgiving dinner, November 23rd, 5 p.m. At Mom's. Hope to see you there. Just that. No love, no we miss you, no signature. Still I smiled. My shoulders dropped. I started making a mental note of the rosemary I'd need for the stuffing, even though they'd probably forget again that it was my recipe. I walked into the house still thinking about it. I hadn't been invited in 3 years, not since Callista said my job made her energy-sensitive friends uncomfortable. But maybe this was a shift. Maybe Mom had said something. Maybe they remembered I existed beyond wiring them money. I showered, changed into soft clothes, set the card on the kitchen counter like a trophy. And then, without even meaning to, I opened the suitcase from the closet. I hadn't touched it in months. It still had a scarf from last winter. I started folding things with no real plan, just the quiet hope of being wanted. The next day, I called, just to be sure. Callista picked up on the second ring. Her voice was always rehearsed, like everything she said had been filtered through a branding team. "Hey, Jolene. Hey." "I just wanted to make sure that invite wasn't a mistake," I said. I tried to keep my voice light. "It was really nice to get." There was a pause. I could hear her exhale, almost like she'd hoped I wouldn't call. "Oh," she said. "Yeah. About that. It actually wasn't supposed to go to you." I blinked. Sorry? We didn't mean to send it. It was part of a batch I mailed before I finalized the guest list. And with everything going on, and Savannah being really sensitive to tension, we just thought it would be best if maybe you sat this one out. I stayed quiet. Callista went on. "It's nothing personal. But we're trying to keep things peaceful this year. And, sometimes your presence shifts the energy. You get it, right?" I didn't. But I said, "Sure." She hesitated. Then, the knife. "Honestly, if you showed up, we might have to pretend we didn't know you." And that was that. I don't remember hanging up. I do remember standing in my kitchen for a long time. The windows were fogged from the kettle I'd forgotten to turn off. My hands were gripping the counter, and I couldn't feel them. Everything felt like background noise, like I'd left the room, but my body stayed. It wasn't just about this year. It was about every year. About the times I made the entire meal, and someone else took credit for the turkey. About the time Mom toasted Callista for holding the family together while I was wiping pie off the floor from a dish I brought. About the way my chair was always the one at the far end, by the kitchen door, the one without a name card. Last year, I'd noticed it. Everyone had little calligraphy place cards, each tied with a sprig of thyme. I sat down and there was nothing at my spot but a napkin. When I asked if someone forgot mine, Callista laughed and said, "Oh, we didn't think you were coming. You're always so unpredictable." She said it in front of everyone, like it was a joke, like I wasn't already 3 wine sips deep into pretending I didn't hear. That was the same year Blake brought a girl he'd just started dating, and she had a card. They even spelled her name right. I used to think it was me, that I was the one who made things hard, That maybe being the sister who worked in hospice care made people uncomfortable. Maybe my job was too heavy for holiday tables. But standing there, in my own kitchen, suitcase half packed, invitation face down on the counter, I finally stopped blaming myself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't text back. Instead, I unpacked. Slowly. Like peeling myself out of something I didn't ask to wear. And I folded the suitcase shut not because I wasn't going anywhere, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to. I had always brought the pie. And this time, I wasn't bringing anything. The invitation sat unopened on the counter for a few more days after the call. I didn't toss it. I didn't burn it. I just let it sit there, its cheery watercolor turkey looking back at me like it was still trying to smile through the awkwardness. Like me. That Thursday, I was cleaning up some emails during lunch when a message from Elowen popped up, just a forwarded image, no text. Curious, I clicked. It was a screenshot of a group chat titled Turkey Table Plan. I scanned it fast, not expecting anything, but then I saw it. A digital seating chart for Thanksgiving. Mom's long dining table mapped out with names, every chair filled, except one in the corner. It had no name, just the words extra cutlery. I didn't feel anger, not immediately. Just a strange cold sinking feeling like being erased twice. First from their lips, now from the layout. I zoomed in. Even Savannah's dog had a Label Pumpkins pillow. But I was utensils. I didn't text Elowen back. I didn't have it in me to ask if she meant to send it. Maybe she did. Maybe it was her way of saying, I see you. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling social. A post from Callista popped up. A neatly styled overhead shot of mini stuffing cups in ramekins, captioned, Testing Grandma's old stuffing recipe with a twist. Can't wait to share it, Thursday. The hashtags were a punch in the gut. Callista's Kitchen, check heirloom flavors. I stared at the photo. That wasn't Grandma's recipe. It was mine. I was 23 when I first made it, cranberries, sage, toasted pecans, sourdough cubes soaked in broth. It tested it 3 times. Finally getting it right, that year, Mom actually looked up from her plate and said, This is the best dish on the table. She even asked for the recipe. It was the only time I ever saw her write something in that old cookbook without changing a thing. That same year, she'd framed a photo of me in the kitchen, hands full of flour, laughing with Dad. That photo used to sit on the hallway table near the front door. It wasn't there anymore. Last I visited, a new picture had taken its place. Callista, holding a wooden spoon with perfectly curled hair and a guest apron from a cooking retreat in Sedona. I'd shrugged it off then. Told myself it was just aesthetics. The next morning, at the clinic, one of the nurses leaned over with a smile and asked, Are you excited for Thursday? I saw your sister's post about her famous stuffing. You guys must have the best Thanksgiving spread. I froze. I smiled back. I lied. I said, She always had a flair for food. Then excused myself to the supply room, locked the door, and sat on a stool, staring at nothing. My breath wasn't coming in right. I didn't cry. I just wanted the air to stop sticking to my lungs. Later that night, I searched the family Facebook group. The event page was already up. Thanksgiving at Vera's final head count, 11. Photos of centerpieces, assigned menu slots. Callista's stuffing was at the center of it all. There was no mention of me, no credit, no comment, not even a placeholder that said, Jolene? Like it never brought that dish, like it had always been hers. The menu said, Thanksgiving isn't Thanksgiving without Callista's signature stuffing passed down with love. I stared at that sentence for 5 straight minutes. Then I went to the bookshelf and pulled down the old family cookbook. I opened to the recipe section. The stuffing page was there, sure, but the handwriting had changed. My name wasn't anywhere on it. The notes I once scribbled in pencil toast pecans first, less broth next time, were gone. It had been recopied, clean, like it had always been someone else's. That night, I didn't cook. I ordered pho from the place on Alameda, the one that always forgets the basil but never the lime. I set the container on my small table, grabbed a fork, and sat across from no one. I stared at the empty chair across from me. I didn't mind eating alone. I'd done it often. But that night, something hit different. I didn't mind being left out of the toast, the group photos, even the damn seating chart. But being rewritten, that burned. I looked down at the bowl in front of me and thought, I don't mind being forgotten. I mind being edited out. Then I reached for the family cookbook again, turned to the back where I used to jot notes, and saw my handwriting erased literally. White out. And under the page, pressed so faint it was almost a ghost, my original recipe title. My name, Jolene R. That was when I realized history isn't rewritten by time, it's rewritten by people with access to the printer. I hadn't planned to open my laptop that night. After the recipe incident, I was in no mood for more family revelations. But when I reached for my phone to check the weather, I saw the email notification from my bank monthly summary ready. I clicked out of habit. That's all it was supposed to be. One transaction stood out. It wasn't the amount that startled me. It was the pattern. I scrolled back $500, $850, $600. Month after month, 2 years worth. All transfers from my account to Vera Malloy. No labels, no thank yous. Not even a text acknowledgement. I leaned back in my chair, hands still resting on the trackpad, and let the numbers wash over me. I hadn't realized how much he'd given. Quietly, automatically. I had covered Mom's prescriptions, her dental work last spring, the broken dryer in January. Every time she said she was a little behind, I just filled the gap. I didn't think twice. I was the gap filler. And yet, they talked like I wasn't even at the table. I closed the tab and stared out the window, where the night had slipped in unnoticed. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the warm underglow from the stove clock. It was 8:12, 5 days until Thanksgiving. I picked up my phone again and called Mom. I didn't plan to argue, I just wanted clarity. Hi, sweetie, she answered, voice syrupy. I could hear the clinking of dishes in the background. Hey! Quick question, did the mortgage finally clear? I asked, keeping it light. Oh yes, she replied instantly. Callista handled it all. She's been wonderful, I swallowed. I thought I was the one covering that for the past year and a half. There was a pause. Too long. Well, she said slowly, you were helping here and there, but Callista took the lead on the refinancing. The paperwork, all that mess. You know how detail-oriented she is. I didn't say anything. And Jolene, she added, you know how worked up you get about money. We just didn't want to trigger you. It's Thanksgiving week. Let's keep things peaceful, okay? There it was. I was too emotional, too reactive, too intense. Always the problem, never the provider. I ended the call with some half-mumbled agreement and sat still for a long moment. The silence was loud. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a worn manila folder labeled House Docs. Inside were copies of transfers, scanned bills, handwritten notes from when I took over Mom's financial tracking after Dad died. None of it matched the current narrative. Not one bit. I took a breath and sat back down. Opened a new document. Title: What I've Done That No One Knows. It started slow. Paid for the new water heater when it burst during the freeze. Wired Blake $400 for a car battery last June. Booked Blake's flight home in 2019. Sent $300 for Savannah's birthday weekend at the spa. Bought the Thanksgiving turkey 3 years straight. The list kept going. Small things, hidden things, things that were never brought up, never posted about, never written into a family memory. I stared at the words. I didn't want praise. I never asked for applause. But I didn't expect to be erased. There was that year the pipes cracked in February. I was the one who called the plumber, paid up front, and followed up with the insurance. I still had the invoice. I'd emailed it to Mom with the subject line, taken care of. She never replied. I remembered a voicemail from Blake. Sis, I'm a little tight on cash. Any chance you could front me the ticket? I'll pay you back right after this gig. He never did. I never mentioned it. I remembered giving Vera my login when she said she couldn't remember passwords anymore. That login still worked. I could see every payment processed in her name. I wasn't angry. Not in the way they expected. Not screaming or shouting. I was still. Like cold water poured over a hot surface, quiet steam rising off me. I added one last bullet point to the list. Continued to show up, even when they made it clear I was optional. I printed the list and pinned it on my fridge. Not for them. For me. They didn't know how much I'd carried. Maybe they never would. But from this moment forward, I wouldn't let them make me question whether I had. I may have been quiet, but that doesn't mean I was invisible. And if they couldn't remember me willingly, I was about to make it impossible to forget. It was just after 9 p.m. when my phone lit up. I'd been reading the same paragraph in a medical journal for 20 minutes without retaining a single word. The buzz startled me, and for a second, I thought maybe somehow Mom had changed her mind. That should text to say, "Come after all, I knew better." Instead, it was Elowen. The preview read, "I know I shouldn't, but you deserve to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat titled Final Dinner Flow. My breath stopped halfway through my throat. Callista's name topped the messages. Her tone was as polished and smug as ever. "Let's not make a plate for her. We're keeping it chill this year, drama-free. You know how she is." Someone responded with a laughing emoji. Then someone else added, "Put her by the garage door with the coats. Or better yet, leave her off completely." I didn't respond to Elowen. I didn't have to. I saved the image, dropped it into a folder I named Proof, then turned my phone screen down and stared at the ceiling. I thought back to all the Thanksgivings I'd spent quietly cleaning dishes while they laughed in the living room. All the times I stayed late to help Mom package leftovers or mend something broken. They'd never said thank you, but I told myself that was just how our family worked. Functional in our own way. But this was premeditated exclusion. Not an accident, not a miscommunication, a choice. The next morning, I was at work, sipping lukewarm coffee in the break room, when Linda from HR popped in. "Jolene!" She smiled, setting her bag down. "Your mom's Thanksgiving letter was so sweet. I love the part about Callista stepping up. That girl's a powerhouse." I didn't even know how to respond. "Oh yeah," I managed. Back at my desk, I opened my inbox and searched for Thanksgiving letter. Sure enough, there it was, emailed to dozens of family and friends, some of whom I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral. The subject line read, "Gratitude and growth, a family note." The body was worse than I imagined. This year, we're thankful for Callista, who's taken on so much to keep the family grounded. From overseeing Mom's house remodel to managing the financials, she's been the steady hand we've needed. No mention of me, not once. I printed the letter, folded it in thirds, and added it to the same folder that held the screenshot. Back home that night, I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded my what I've done list. It had grown. I stared at every line, from the time I paid for Blake's busted radiator to the grocery runs when Mom's card got declined. It wasn't about forgetting anymore. This was erasure. I muttered out loud, to no one. They're trying to cauterize me out of the narrative. And for once, I didn't try to rationalize it away. I stood up, walked over to my file drawer, and pulled out the records I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, screenshots, scanned checks, copies of the wiring receipts I'd sent to Mom. Each one a quiet little echo of support. I organized them by date, slipped them into sleeves, and labeled the new folder, "Received but never recognized." Then, I picked up my phone and recorded a voice message, not dramatic, not emotional, just steady. "Hi, Mom." I saw what was sent. The group messages, the newsletter. I won't pretend anymore. If this continues, I won't be silent. I didn't expect a reply. And I didn't need one, because now I had enough truth to carry in both hands. They wanted silence. What they didn't expect was that I'd weaponize it. It was late afternoon when the text came in from June, an old friend of the family who somehow remained neutral in the quiet civil war. She probably didn't know it, but she just handed me a loaded gun. "Thought you'd appreciate this, Callista, and Travis really put on a show," her message read. A link followed. I clicked, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. The video was a 2-minute toast, clearly recorded in Mom's backyard. String lights twinkled above a perfectly dressed table, the kind I used to help arrange. Now it was all Callista. At the center of the video, Travis stood, wineglass in hand, beaming as if he'd earned something. "This family welcomed me like I've always belonged here," he said, raising his glass. "Not everyone gets that." Laughter, applause. The camera panned briefly across the dining room wall, stopping for half a second on a family portrait, an older one. I recognized it immediately. It used to have me in it. Now it was cropped. I was gone. I closed the video and stared at the screen. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, something clicked into place. I opened my contacts and tapped Callista's name. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she answered. Casual. Like we weren't about to step into a decades-old minefield. "I saw the video," I said. "I heard him." She let out a small breath through her nose, the sound people make when they think you're being ridiculous. "Jolene, you always take things too personally. He didn't even say your name." "Exactly." There was silence. "You've taken my place, my silence, and now you want my absence to bless your image?" I said, my voice calm but cutting. "Be careful what you do next." She tried to laugh it off. "It's not that deep." "It is to me," I replied. "And it will be to others, if it has to be." Then I hung up. Later that evening, I stopped by a little cafe near the clinic to meet an old colleague. We'd planned the coffee weeks ago. The timing felt cruel, but I didn't cancel. As we talked about nothing traffic, office gossip, the ridiculous price of avocados, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a group text from Mom. "So grateful to have everyone here this year. Final headcount confirmed. Keep it intimate, just 10 of us. No greeting, no signature, no mention of me." I stared at the words for a full minute before deleting the message. Not blocked, not responded to, just gone. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, microwaved leftover curry, and sat down at my desk. I opened my notes app and created a new entry titled, "Document Every Omission." I didn't fill it yet, just saved the title. Then I opened my email. This wasn't going to be a rant. I wasn't venting. I was recording history. I wrote to only 2 people, Vera and Callista. I started with bullet points, transfer dates, financial coverage for the mortgage, the text from June, the group chat screenshot, the newsletter, screenshots attached. Then I wrote, for years, I believed that my value was in my silence, that love meant filling in the blanks without ever asking to be written into the story. But silence is protection until it becomes consent. I don't consent anymore. I didn't sign it with warmth. I didn't soften it with a line like "I still love you." I just hit send. Then I closed my laptop, set down my glass, and sat still, breathing. 2 days. That's what they had. They had 2 days to fix it. Or 2 days to double down. They chose. The day before Thanksgiving started quiet. I'd slept poorly, waking from one of those restless dreams where you're shouting but no sound comes out. The sky was low and gray, and even my coffee tasted flat. I thought the worst of it had already passed. It hadn't. Around 11 a.m., while I was reviewing patient case files at the clinic, a coworker stopped by my desk. "Hey," she said, handing me her phone with a smile. "Your family looks amazing in this video. I didn't know you guys did these kinds of things." My stomach turned. The video's title read, "Celebrating Our Family Pillars." The thumbnail alone made my hands go cold. It was a still of our mother's living room, decorated like something out of a lifestyle blog, with string lights and soft music playing underneath. I tapped play. The first clip showed Callista ladling soup into Mom's bowl. The second showed someone signing a check for property taxes. Instantly recognized the sweater. It was mine. The scene had been recorded 2 years ago. My hands, my handwriting. But the caption read, "Callista, ensuring the legacy continues." Then came the photo of me hugging Mom in the hospital parking lot after her minor stroke. That moment, the one where she whispered, "Don't leave me here alone," was now turned into a polished slideshow piece, repurposed under the tag, "Daughters Who Lead with Grace." I didn't cry. I clicked save, named the file Exhibit A, and sent it to myself. By noon, I was driving across town to meet a former classmate who now worked in property law. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly through the occasional like on Facebook and a shared disgust for Arizona real estate. I told her I needed 5 minutes. She gave me 20. We sat in a small office lined with manila folders and outdated art prints of desert blooms. I slid a folder across the desk. "These are copies of the original deed," I said, "from 2014. I co-signed when we refinanced after Dad died." She took one look, then pulled up the most recent filing from the public registry. My name wasn't on it. "It was retitled 6 months ago," she said, frowning. "Callistus, name only." I asked about the signature. She pulled up the file and turned the monitor toward me. I stared at the scrawl next to mine, supposedly mine. "That's not how I sign my name," I said quietly. "I didn't think so," she replied. "It's close, but off. And technically, if you didn't authorize this, you have a case." I nodded, then stood up and shook her hand. "Thanks, Leona." Back home, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. They drew the line. I crossed it. I compiled everything: the tribute video, the fake deed, screenshots from past bank transfers. I attached them to an email. The subject line: "You know what you did." No greetings, no explanations, just facts. The video shows moments I lived, claimed by someone else. The deed shows a signature I didn't write. The pattern shows a family more interested in appearances than truth. At the bottom, I wrote, "You've rewritten me out of our family's history, but now I've documented the edits. If this isn't fixed by tomorrow, I speak." Publicly. I didn't expect a response, but I sent it anyway. Then I texted Mom, "If you want this to stay quiet, tomorrow is your only chance to make it right." Afterward, I sat in the kitchen with the window cracked open, letting the cold roll in across the tile. I made tea and opened a blank document titled "The Full Story." I started writing not a blog post, not a takedown, just the truth. I helped build what they now use to erase me. Line by line, I laid it out. The birthdays I planned, the repairs I paid for, the hospital nights, the trust, the pattern, the silence. I transferred the files onto a flash drive. It clicked into place with a tiny sound that felt louder than it should have. Then I practiced saying it out loud. One breath, one truth, one shot. And just when I thought they couldn't stoop lower, they did. Thanksgiving morning started with a vibration. Not the kind you ignore, this one had weight. The kind that settles in your chest before your brain can name it. I reached for my phone and saw dozens of notifications, tags, DMs. Messages like, "Oof, saw that post, and are you okay?" None of them said what happened, just vague pity. I opened Instagram. The first story was a slow pan across Mom's backyard twinkling lights, a floral centerpiece with eucalyptus and dried orange slices, name cards with gold lettering. The camera held just long enough to capture the extra plate, artfully styled but noticeably alone. Over it, in white font with sparkle emojis, "This year we keep it clean, calm, and classy." The next slide was a Mamiya woman screaming at a turkey, face contorted mid-rant. Below it, the caption, "Some people bring drama, some bring dessert. Know the difference." I wasn't named. I didn't need to be. The third story? A photo of the dog I trained, sitting obediently in Callistus' lap. His little sweater matched the napkins. "He always barked at chaos," her caption read. "Look how peaceful he is now." That dog had slept beside me during my recovery from surgery. He'd been mine until Mom said it was better if he stayed, for the sake of routine. Callista never even liked animals. But there he was, another thing she'd inherited like a legacy she didn't earn. I set the phone down and stared out the kitchen window. The street was empty. Even the wind had quieted. There was a Thanksgiving, years ago, when I came straight from the hospital, migraine pounding so hard I could barely see straight. I still brought the pie, still set the table, still stayed after everyone left to scrub gravy out of the stovetop burners. No one noticed. I hadn't screamed then either. Just smiled, nodded, vanished into a dish towel. But this public parade of gaslighting wrapped in hashtags and filters was something else. I stood, opened my laptop, and clicked into the video project I'd started the night before. The original tribute video had been neatly edited, a clean erase of my name, my presence, my hands. I dragged the same clips back in, but this time I added captions. Actual captions. Meal prepared by Jolene Rain 2017. Mortgage assistance wired by Jolene 2019. Thanksgiving cleanup Jolene, uncredited. I didn't post it, not yet. Instead, I opened my camera roll and found one photo, just one, that held everything. Thanksgiving 2017. I'm at the head of the table, hair frizzed from cooking all day, apron stained with cranberry sauce. I'm smiling, tired, holding the carving knife because no one else wanted to do it. That was the last year they asked me to bring anything. I posted it on my personal page. No filter, no edit. The caption read, 2017. I paid for the meal. I cooked it. I cleaned. That was the last year I was asked to bring anything. I didn't tag anyone. I turned off comments. 10 minutes later, Vera saw it. I knew because she viewed my story, something she rarely did. An hour later, I received an email. Subject line, we didn't mean harm. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The message was already clear. Their kind of peace only worked if I stayed quiet, if I stayed gone. But I was here. They called it peace, but I knew it was only quiet because they thought I was gone for good. Thanksgiving evening used to hum with rhythm chairs scraping back, glasses clinking, my mother shouting from the kitchen for someone to grab the rolls. I could still hear the echo of it in my head, but this year, my apartment was silent except for the soft gurgle of my heater kicking on. I'd made myself a plate of roasted vegetables and turkey from the market deli. Nothing fancy. No one to impress. I was halfway through my wine when the notification came in. Callista Wren has posted a new video. I didn't hesitate. The title floated across the screen in elegant cursive. Thanksgiving Gratitude. Our Legacy in Motion. The background music was soft piano, overly sentimental, like something used in pharmaceutical commercials. The video opened with Blake lighting candles, Vera placing her hand over her heart during grace, and Callista laughing with Travis like they were the nucleus of something divine. The camera moved through the table, catching moments of toast, clinking glasses, shared glances. People nodded and smiled, carving turkey, hugging mom. Everyone except me. I wasn't blurred out. I wasn't cut awkwardly. I just wasn't there. The final caption read, when we protect peace, joy finds a place at the table. I paused the video and didn't move, not even to exhale. Then, I saved it to the folder on my desktop erasure evidence. I sat for a long while. The room darkened around me as the sun went down behind the adobe walls of Santa Fe. And still I sat, letting the screen go black, my reflection staring back. And then me phone buzzed again. This time, a video message from Malcolm Ortiz. I frowned. Malcolm was a former client's son, now a friend of Vera's through church. He'd been invited to dinner, apparently. The clip was short, clearly taken with one hand under the table. It showed Malcolm glancing at a photo in Vera's hallway, an old one, of me helping Mom into her car after her stroke. My arm was wrapped around her waist, my hair up in a messy knot, my face scrunched in concern. Malcolm's voice came from off-camera. Wait, isn't that the woman who helped my mom during recovery? Dr. Rain? Silence. Then a voice, someone I didn't recognize, mumbled, I think that's her, yeah. He followed up, louder this time. She's the reason my mother is still alive. How come she's not here? In the background, you could hear a fork drop. A wine glass hit the table just a little too hard. Someone cleared their throat. The video ended. I stared at the screen, stunned. Not because someone remembered, but because someone spoke. Unprompted. Without knowing the damage he'd just inflicted on their carefully crafted narrative. 10 minutes later, I noticed Callista's story had gone quiet. Nothing new. The recap video had been deleted. Vera didn't respond to the tag in my earlier photo, but now she was watching. Then came the ripple. My cousin in Portland shared a cryptic tweet. Sometimes the person not at the table is the one who fed everyone for years. No tag. No context. But people knew. Callista didn't post again that night. Vera texted me twice and called once. I let them all go to voicemail. After cleaning up dinner, I lit a rosemary candle, poured a second glass of wine, and sat down with my journal. I wrote slowly, deliberately. I was never the burden. I was the foundation, and they mistook me for the floor. Then I opened the video editor again. This time, I dropped in clips from every year. Thanksgiving 2016, when I hosted. 2018, when I drove 6 hours to pick up mom's friend with no family. 2019, when I cooked for 14 people because Callista got a migraine and stayed in bed. I titled it simply, The Other Side of the Table. No music, no filters, just timestamps, names, and facts. I posted it, no caption, just truth. Some legacies are chosen, others have to be reclaimed. A week passed, no apologies came, not a single phone call, not even a quick text with a lazy excuse. There was no knock at my door with a guilt-ridden pie or an awkward, "We didn't mean it like that." Just silence. But silence speaks. And sometimes, it screams. The Legacy in Motion video Callista had proudly posted vanished without a word. No announcement, no explanation. Just gone like it had never existed. Vera's Facebook page hadn't seen a single update since Thanksgiving Day. The last post was a blurry, dimly lit photo of a pie with the caption, "Grateful for simplicity this year." Simplicity. That word hit different when you knew who got left out of the picture. I sat alone in my apartment and let it all wash over me, everything. The grief, the anger, the betrayal, and the odd peace that followed it. It turns out the absence of guilt is often louder than the apology you never get. And that absence, it echoed in every corner of my now quiet life. On the third day, I got an email. Malcolm Ortiz. The subject line was blank. The message? Just a few lines. "I showed your tribute to my mother. She cried. She said, 'That girl saved me.' I thought you should know. No hashtags, no emojis, no flattery, just truth." It cracked something open in me. Later that same day, another message arrived, this one from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "I always knew you were the one holding that family up," she wrote. "I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." It was surreal. All these quiet truths surfacing when the noise had finally faded. The next morning, I met with Liana, my property attorney. We sat across from each other in a small sunlit office. She had her glasses perched at the tip of her nose, flipping through the paperwork I'd brought. "The signature comparisons are strong," she said, pointing to the forged deed. "If you wanted to file a claim, this would hold in court." I took a breath, steady and long. Then I shook my head. "I'm not filing." She blinked. "You're sure?" "Yeah," I said, sliding the folder back toward her. "Let them keep the walls." I kept the truth. We processed the disassociation paperwork, officially removing me from all ties to the property. And when I walked out of that office, I didn't feel free, not exactly, but I felt unburdened. Like the weight I'd been carrying finally had a place to re-stand. That place wasn't my back anymore. That night, while the kettle hummed in the background, I scrolled through photos tagged by mutual acquaintances. One image caught my eye, a snapshot from Vera's dinner. The same dinner I'd been ghosted from. Everyone looked so perfectly posed around the table. Callista beamed at the center. Mom sat at the head, proudly upright. And then, there it was. A chair, tucked slightly back from the rest. Napkin folded, plate untouched. No one sitting in it, no one even pretending. They hadn't replaced me. They hadn't covered it up. They just left it there. No one mentioned it in the caption, no one explained it. But I stared at that chair for a long time. I whispered aloud, "That was mine. Still is." And with that quiet acknowledgement, I closed the photo. Later, I lit a rosemary candle, the same scent I used to bake into my stuffing every year, the one everyone said made the whole house smell like home. I sat at my desk, opened a new journal, and didn't write about them. Not this time. Instead, I wrote about Mrs. Eldridge, the patient whose son never visited, but who clung to my hand like it was the last rope tethering her to this world. I wrote about Mr. Bennett, a Vietnam vet with a crooked smile and a precise technique for folding hospital corners. I wrote about people who didn't need a family tree to see me, people who looked and truly saw. That night, I also found a nonprofit one that advocates for elderly patients forgotten by their families. They were understaffed and overwhelmed. So I reached out. I offered what I could: time, energy, heart, because I had plenty of that to give. I didn't walk away from my family out of hate. I walked away because I finally loved myself more than I needed their approval, more than I feared their silence. For the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like I was fading from their story. I felt like I was finally writing my own. Some families are inherited, some are chosen, but the ones who see you not out of duty but out of genuine recognition, those are the ones worth holding on to, and those are the ones I choose now. That's my legacy. Not the house, not the seat at the table, but the life I rebuilt outside of their silence. There are moments in life when silence feels louder than any scream. And sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't what's said, it's what's erased. Looking back, I didn't choose to walk away from my family out of anger. I did it because I finally understood the value of my own presence. You can only be written out of a story so many times before you start writing your own. If you've ever felt invisible in the place that should have loved you most, let this be your reminder. Your worth is not defined by the version of you someone else tells. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to leave tables where your voice is only welcome when it's quiet. I wonder, have you ever had to step back to finally be seen? What did that moment look like for you? Share your story in the comments. I read them all, and your words might just be the ones someone else needs today. If this story touched you, comment 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect with you, I'd love to hear why it helps us grow, and your perspective matters. If you believe in stories that heal, challenge, and reveal truth, don't forget to subscribe. New stories are coming that you won't want to miss. Until then, choose peace, even if it means walking away.
Hello, my name's Zena. I worked 3 jobs, every day, every hour, thinking I was just unlucky, poor, invisible. But then, one night at dinner, Grandma smiled at me and said, "Hope you're enjoying the $9,000 a month?" 9,000? That's when I learned my sister had been living rich off money meant for me. The worst part? My mother knew. They all knew. They kept me working myself sick while they passed my name around like it was a gift bag. What kind of family does that? And if that was just the beginning, you might be wondering, how far did they go? So was I. I was already 2 minutes late when I pulled into the long gravel driveway of Grandma Althea's estate, tires crunching under the weight of my fatigue. The house stood like it always had, majestic and unmoved, white columns framed against soft Georgia spring light, draped in creeping ivy and generations of expectation. My clothes smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning solution, a mix of my 2 side gigs that left just enough to scrape by. I'd worked 14 hours straight that day, barely enough time to switch shoes, much less shift identities, from invisible laborer to someone worthy of an invite. I adjusted my cardigan in the car mirror, smoothed down my frizzy hair, and gave myself the kind of pep talk only a girl with no power can give. Keep your head down. Smile when it hurts. Don't embarrass yourself. I stepped out, clutching the bottle of grocery store wine like it could buy me credibility. Inside, the air smelled of rosemary, lemon oil, and old money. The family buzzed like bees around the chandelier-lit dining room. There was polished silverware, Althea's vintage china, and everyone dressed as though someone was about to propose or confess. I walked in unnoticed. No one paused, not even my mother. They were all too busy listening to Isolde charm Aunt May about some art installation she'd curated. Isolde always knew how to fill a room. Her voice was bright, her laugh timed, her words tailored. She wore a beige silk dress, the kind that whispers instead of clings, and a pearl bracelet that looked suspiciously like the one Grandma once promised me for graduation. But that was a memory I'd long learned to archive. I eased into my chair. There was no place card with my name on it, just a napkin folded too neatly beside a butter knife. I sat down quietly, eyes scanning for anything familiar, anything that felt like it still belonged to me. The meal began like every other family dinner. Chatter about real estate, politics whispered in code, and compliments passed like salt. I nodded when addressed, chuckled politely when expected. No one asked about my work. No one ever did. Halfway through dessert, pecan pie and mint tea, Grandma Althea stood with a slow, dignified grace. She tapped her spoon gently against her crystal glass. The room quieted like obedient schoolchildren. "I just want to say," she began, eyes sweeping across the long table, "how proud I am of my granddaughters. Isolde, your gallery show in Charleston was stunning. Your gift for design is nothing short of remarkable." Isolde tilted her head, faux humble smile in place. "And Zena," Grandma said, turning to me, voice syrupy sweet, "I'm so glad to know that the monthly transfers have made your life easier. $9,000 a month is a blessing I was happy to share. You deserve comfort." My fork paused mid-air. 9,000 what? I blinked, then blinked again. Surely I'd misheard. All eyes turned to me. Isolde tilted her wine glass with a smirk so faint only I could see it. I felt the blood drain from my face. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I forced a nod, swallowed hard, and muttered, "Thank you, Grandma," my voice barely holding together. I excused myself moments later, murmuring something about needing fresh air. No one stopped me. Out on the wraparound porch, I sat on the edge of a wooden bench, pulling my phone from my purse with shaking hands. My fingers moved with mechanical precision, opening my bank app, scrolling transaction history, double-checking account numbers. Nothing. No deposits, no trace, no Althea Monroe, or family trust, or monthly transfer. Just paychecks from the cafe, the library, the late-night cleaning gig, and rent withdrawals, utility bills, overdraft fees. A few years back, there had been some odd flags on my account. Small withdrawals I didn't recall, but I'd chalked it up to forgetfulness, the haze of working multiple jobs, constantly juggling fatigue. Now my account showed a trail of deposits, just not into my hands. Transfers under my name, routed to an unfamiliar checking number. The beneficiary listed wasn't me, but the name on the profile still said Zena Quinn. I sat back, the phone heavy in my lap, breath stuck between fury and collapse. Behind me, laughter carried from the dining room. I imagined Isolde sipping wine, retelling some embellished story, while our mother nodded like it was gospel. And me? I'd spent the last 5 years scrubbing floors, missing meals, reusing the same worn shoes until the soles gave out. I worked 3 jobs to survive, and somehow, they'd made me look ungrateful for blessings I never even touched. They didn't just steal money. They stole the story. The story of a hardworking woman who never asked for much, who they now painted as spoiled but distant, too proud to thank those who gave her everything. I stared out at the lawn, neat hedges trimmed into shapes that reminded me of who I was expected to be, quiet, shaped, trimmed to fit. No more. I clutched the phone tighter. My pulse was steady now, cold, focused. She was living well, on my name. My silence had bought her silk. That would be the last thing it ever paid for. Sleep didn't last. I lay in bed with my shoes still on, the ceiling fan humming a rhythm that sounded more like warning than comfort. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I peeled myself off the couch and made it to the bed, but my thoughts never slowed down long enough to rest. When sunlight finally crept through the thin blinds of my studio apartment, my body ached like I'd spent the night fighting a ghost. And in a way, I had. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app again, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe Grandma had meant a different kind of transfer. Maybe, no. There it was. My name attached to transaction after transaction. Deposits that never reached me. Routing to an account I didn't recognize but tagged as Xena Q. I stared at it until my vision blurred. My hands itched for answers, not theories, facts. By 8:30, I was dressed in jeans and a plain navy button-up standing in front of my bathroom mirror. My reflection looked like someone who'd been surviving, not living. I didn't have makeup on, just conviction. I left my apartment, skipped breakfast, and drove downtown. It was a Friday morning in Savannah, the kind of day where azaleas bloomed like confetti along the sidewalks and the air smelled faintly of citrus and old brick. The contrast between the city's calm and my inner turmoil was unbearable. I parked in front of Heritage Bank. The building's glass doors reflected a version of myself I hardly recognized. Tired, squared shoulders, jaw set with purpose. The receptionist greeted me politely, then asked me to wait. I tapped my fingers on the armrest of the leather chair, counting heartbeats until a woman in her 50s stepped forward. She wore a maroon blazer and moved like someone who'd seen too many people break down in her office. Her name tag read Marjorie Clark. "Miss Quinn?" she said. I stood and followed her into a private office. It smelled faintly of printer toner and quiet decisions. "How can I help you today?" "I need to see my transaction history, including all third-party access permissions. I believe someone has been using my name, my accounts." Marjorie tilted her head, typing swiftly. "Let's pull everything. Full permissions, account routing, linked devices. You're the primary on file, yes?" "Yes, I should be." Within seconds, the screen showed my name, except it wasn't just mine anymore. Marjorie narrowed her eyes. "There's an email here that's not standard. It ends in .gallery.co. Is that yours?" I shook my head. My stomach sank. "There's also a phone number that doesn't match what we have on record for you," she continued, frowning. "Mailing address is different too. Charleston." My lips parted, but nothing came out at first. "I've never lived in Charleston. That's my sister's city." Marjorie turned to me fully. "Do you recognize this signature?" She slid a printed PDF across the desk. It was a power of attorney form. It had my name typed at the bottom, and a signature that mimicked mine, but looked slightly too perfect. "That's not my handwriting," I said quietly. She tapped her pen against the desk, exhaled slowly. "This form was submitted back in 2021. It gave full control to the account with that alternate email and number. Whoever submitted it, they've had access ever since." "Is that even legal?" "Only if it was signed knowingly." I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for copies of everything, printed and digital. Marjorie obliged without hesitation, offering a sympathetic nod I wasn't ready to receive. Outside the bank, I sat in my car with the engine running. Papers in my lap, questions in my throat. I flipped through the statements. Thousands spent at high-end boutiques, monthly donations to an arts foundation I'd never heard of, a lease on a luxury SUV, all under my name, even the mortgage on a downtown condo in Charleston. Isolda's condo. She hadn't just skimmed off my identity. She had planted her entire lifestyle on it. I thought about the time I'd asked her to co-sign for a small loan, just $1,200 to cover a security deposit when I moved into my current place. She'd laughed and said, "You need to be more responsible, Xena." That was 2 years ago. I started driving, but not home. I didn't know where I was going until I ended up a few blocks from River Street, where tourists swarmed cafes and souvenir shops. I parked behind a Whole Foods and wandered up the sidewalk like a ghost in my own skin. That's when I saw her. Isolda, stepping out of a salon with sunglasses perched on her head, phone tucked between her ear and shoulder, laughing like she had nothing to hide. She wore heels I couldn't afford and a trench coat in camel that looked like it belonged in a fashion ad, and parked at the curb next to her, my name, my burden, a black luxury SUV with custom plates. She never saw me, and I didn't approach her, not yet. I watched her for exactly 10 seconds, and that was all I needed. Not to gather more proof, not to scream in public. I needed to remember. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a family squabble. It was a theft dressed in pearls. a betrayal executed in paperwork. I turned away before she could spot me and headed back to my car. I had a folder full of evidence, a name soaked in someone else's perfume, and something I hadn't felt in years. A plan. And by the time I got back to my apartment, the sun was already tipping toward late afternoon. I hadn't eaten, but hunger wasn't what gnawed at me. I stood at the kitchen counter, hands flat on the cool laminate surface, replaying Isolda's laugh, her car, the look on her face like the world belonged to her and always had. I'd barely changed out of my jeans when I found myself grabbing my keys again. I didn't text, didn't call, I just drove. The route to my parents' house hadn't changed. Same mossy oaks arching over the road like a memory trying to hold on. The Lynette home sat tucked in a quiet cul-de-sac of beige security and carefully trimmed lawns. It looked exactly like it always had. Except now, it felt like a stage where I was about to confront an entire act built without me. I parked across the street, walked up the path with a steadiness that surprised even me. The door was slightly ajar. I knocked once and stepped in. "Mom?" I called. Inside, the smell of lemon cleaner and vanilla candles hit me immediately. My father sat on the sofa, a gardening magazine open in his lap. He looked up, startled but not surprised. "Zena?" he said, already rising. "Want some coffee?" "No thanks," I said, my voice sharper than intended. He nodded awkwardly and shuffled toward the kitchen. Mom appeared in the doorway of the dining room, drying her hands on a linen towel. She didn't greet me. Just stood there, eyes narrowed slightly, like she already knew this wasn't a social visit. "I need to talk to you," I said, stepping inside, closing the door behind me. "About what?" she asked, tone flat. "The money, the accounts, what Grandma said last night." I moved closer, pulled out the folded printouts from my purse and laid them on the console table by the entryway. They show transfers in my name. Not to me, to Isolda's account. A power of attorney with my forged signature, linked to her phone, her address. Mom didn't move. She glanced down at the papers, then at me. "I know," she said simply. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "You..." "What?" "She told me," Mom continued, voice calm like she was explaining a grocery list. "Isolda stepped in because you weren't capable of managing anything at the time. You were all over the place, job to job, sleeping odd hours, forgetting things. Because I was working 3 jobs, I snapped. "To stay afloat, sure," she said, dismissing the words like they were excuses. "But that's the point, isn't it? You weren't stable. Isolda did what she had to protect the family's investment in you." "It wasn't an investment. It was a gift. Meant for me." She gave a half shrug. "You weren't doing anything with it anyway." I felt something snap, quietly, but completely. "So you just handed her my future? Without telling me? Without even asking?" "I did what made sense," she said. "Your sister has always had a head for structure. You were just trying to survive." My hands were clenched now. "And you decided that made me unworthy." My father re-entered with a steaming mug, only to pause in the doorway when he caught the tone. "She helped you, Zena," Mom went on, still calm. "You make messes. You always have. She keeps things orderly. She made sure your name wasn't tied to anything embarrassing." My laugh came out dry. "You mean she made sure my name was tied to everything that benefited her?" From the corner of the living room, I heard a cough. I hadn't realized Aunt Miriam was there, curled in the armchair with a glass of tea. "She's always been dramatic," she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "I remember her crying during Easter because no one cut the cake her way." I turned toward her, stunned. "You think this is about cake?" "I think," Mom interjected, "you're turning a private decision into a public accusation." "No," I said, voice rising. "You made a private betrayal into a family tradition, and now I'm just the one dragging it into the light." No one said anything. Dad finally spoke, voice quiet. "Let's all just calm down. It's done now." "Not to me," I said. I looked at all of them. Their calm, their comfort, their refusal to feel guilt. They had normalized my erasure, framed it as necessity, logic, love, even. I used to think if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, you'd believe in me again, I said. But I don't need that anymore. I don't need you to believe in me. I need you to get out of the way. I left the papers on the table, walked to the door. No one followed. Back in the car, the silence felt different. It didn't press down. It cleared space. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't write in a journal or call a friend. I opened my laptop. I started with a spreadsheet, names, dates, amounts, accounts. Then I opened a blank document, titled it Evidence, Identity Fraud. After that came screenshots, printed statements, notarized requests. I built the bones of a case. Not for the courts, not yet. For me. To remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that what happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, and it was sanctioned. They'd always wanted me quiet, invisible. They were about to see how loud I could be. I didn't sleep much that week. Between scanning documents, reviewing financial logs, and replaying every moment where my family turned a blind eye, my nights blurred into gray mornings. I worked my shifts, went through the motions, but everything felt dimmer, like my body was still moving through Savannah's spring heat, but my mind had drifted somewhere colder. On Thursday evening, just as I was finishing my third coffee refill at the library desk, my phone lit up. Grandma Althea. A call from her always arrived like a drumbeat from an older world, elegant, deliberate, and rarely unexpected. I stared at the screen for 2 full rings before picking up. "Hi, Grandma," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Zena, sweetheart," she replied gently. "I was wondering if you had a free afternoon this weekend. I'm going through the family photo albums and my hands aren't what they used to be." I blinked. That wasn't what I'd expected. "I could use your help," she added, "and your memory. You always remembered who wore what, who stood where." The invitation caught me off guard. After everything, this. "I'll be there Saturday," I said without hesitation. That morning, I left my apartment early. The sun hadn't yet turned aggressive, and the air still held a trace of dew. On the drive to her estate, I rehearsed every version of how the day might go. Polite small talk, questions buried in smiles, perhaps even a soft apology tucked inside a dusty photo sleeve. But part of me also knew this wasn't about pictures. It was about presence and what had been erased. When I pulled into the driveway, the white columns of her house stood firm, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. I stepped inside, greeted by the familiar smell of lemon polish and lavender sachets. Her house always smelled like memory. Althea sat in the parlor, an old oak box of photo albums beside her, spectacles perched low on her nose. She looked up and smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach the corners of her eyes. "Thank you for coming, dear," she said. "These old fingers don't like the photo corners anymore." I sat across from her, knees brushing the coffee table, and pulled the nearest album toward me. It was labeled Family Gatherings, 2015 to 2021. We started slow. Birthdays, backyard barbecues, holiday dinners. She asked questions, I answered. "Who was that boy with the crooked tie?" "Oh, that was Kyle's oldest. And that dog, Tucker, of course." Then we got to 2019. She turned the page and pointed. "Now this," she said, "was the Easter brunch in Charleston. Isolde had just redecorated the porch. You remember?" I looked down at the full-page photo. Everyone was there. Isolde, her parents, our cousins, even Aunt Jean, who never traveled. But something was missing. Me. "I remember," I said quietly, "because I took this picture." Althea paused. "But Isolde said you didn't show up that year." "I did," I replied. "I was there, behind the camera. That's the day she asked me to take family portraits so she could be in them all. She said, 'You're not photogenic anyway, Zena.' Then she laughed like it was a compliment." Althea's lips pressed together. Her hands stayed frozen on the corner of the page. We flipped a few more, same pattern. I was missing from Thanksgiving, absent from New Year's, forgotten in 3 years of recorded memory. "Would you mind if I got some water?" I asked, standing up before she could respond. Of course, dear. The kitchen hasn't moved. I walked down the hall, past the dining room, and into the place I used to sneak cookies from when I was 8. The faucet squeaked the way it always had. After filling a glass, I noticed her old flip phone sitting in its charging cradle on the side counter. That thing was practically a relic. It probably still had voicemails from 2009. Something tugged at me. Intuition or habit, I couldn't say. I picked up the phone and navigated to saved messages. Most were from pharmacies or old church friends, and then I saw it. New message, April 8th, 2021. From unknown. I pressed play. Zena, sweetheart, I left you the gift through Isolda. Did you receive it? Call me. I hope it helped. Love you. I stood there frozen, phone still to my ear. Grandma had called me. She had left something for me, and I never knew. Because Isolda never told me. Because Isolda probably erased that message from my side before it ever reached me. I walked back into the parlor with the phone still in my hand. Althea looked up, startled. I found something, I said, placing the phone gently on the table. I pressed play again. The message filled the room like an old ghost returning home. She listened silently, her face unreadable. When the message ended, she reached forward, clicked the phone shut, and sat back. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I sent that necklace for your birthday, the emerald one. You always loved green. I never got it, I replied. She must have kept it. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her tea, but her voice remained composed. I trusted the wrong granddaughter, she murmured. It wasn't dramatic. No gasp, no tears. Just a quiet admission, like a crack appearing in marble, not visible from a distance, but once seen, never unseen. I didn't press further. That wasn't the moment for it. But something shifted in the room, the kind of shift that doesn't move chairs or pictures, but moves perception. The frame had changed. The version of the family she believed in had changed. The photos we'd looked at were still laid across the table, but now even she could see what had been cut out. The silence after Grandma's words lingered longer than any thunderclap ever could. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a hand on the table, but the shift was unmistakable. The way her teacup paused mid-air. The way she didn't look at me when she said it. She wasn't doubting me anymore. She wasn't defending Isolda, not even internally. A quiet fracture had begun, and it was widening by the second. We sat together in her sunroom as late afternoon shadows stretched across the polished floors. I offered to help with some storage boxes she kept tucked away behind the antique sideboard. Ones she hadn't touched in years, she said. She nodded, then added gently, Be careful with the blue one. That has some of the old jewelry receipts and letters from your grandfather's time. I nodded and carried them to the sitting area by the window, where light fell in a long ribbon across the carpet. The room smelled like dried lavender and worn leather, Grandma's favorites. As I flipped through a manila folder of older documents, something caught my eye. A pale green envelope, slightly crumpled, with my name written on it in Grandma's distinct handwriting. I glanced at her. She was still in the kitchen, rinsing out her teacup. Inside the envelope was a receipt, custom emerald necklace, my birthstone, ordered and paid for in April 2021. The shipping address, Isolda's condo in Charleston. A weight settled in my chest. I held the paper tighter than I needed to, fingers pressing into the faded ink. A second page was stapled behind it, an email printout. From isolda@gallery@gmail.com to Althea Monroe at monroelegacy.org. Subject, necklace gift. Don't worry about Zena. I'll explain later. She's fragile. Better I hold on to it for now. My jaw locked. Fragile? That was the word she used to excuse theft. I didn't realize Grandma had walked back in until she spoke softly behind me. You found it, didn't you? I turned. Her face was pale, and for the first time, she looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. She told me you weren't ready for it, she said. That you were going through something, emotionally, that the gift might overwhelm you. I held up the paper. Does this look like protection to you, or does it look like control? She didn't answer, but her silence was different now. Not defensive, just broken. I was 29, I added, working 3 jobs. I wasn't having a breakdown, I was surviving, and no one asked me how. She slowly sat on the ottoman, pressing her hands into her knees. I thought I was doing what was best, trusting the one who seemed steady. I exhaled, quieter than the anger in me deserved. She made sure I stayed invisible. You gave her the power, and she used it to make me disappear. Grandma closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked straight at me. You're not invisible anymore. That was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I nodded, then folded the receipt and email neatly, placing them back into the envelope and tucking it into my purse. I stood, smoothed the front of my shirt, and said, I need to make a phone call. She didn't ask who. Maybe she already knew. Out on the back porch, I stared at the horizon for a moment, letting the wind off the garden cool my skin. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed. She answered on the 3rd ring. Zena? Isolda's voice was breezy, like she hadn't stolen a dime, like she wasn't playing house with my identity. To what do I owe the pleasure? You know what I found, I said calmly. A beat, then a laugh. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're mad about the necklace. I'm not mad, I replied. I'm done. Zena, you're overreacting. I've always looked out for you. Always. You think you'd even be standing without me? You think Grandma would have sent you anything without my guidance? You mean without your filtering, your editing, your rewriting of who I am? She let out a soft chuckle. You're being dramatic again. No, I said slowly, deliberately. I'm being clear. If one more thing of mine goes missing, be it money, mail, memories, I won't be calling you next time. I'll be calling my lawyer. There was silence on the other end. Then a scoff. You've always needed someone to manage you, Zena. I did it because no one else could, because you fall apart if someone doesn't clean up your messes. That's not protection, I said evenly. That's possession. And I'm not yours. I ended the call before she could say anything else. The wind shifted slightly, bringing in the scent of jasmine from the trellis. I stood there for a while longer, letting the quiet soak into me, steadying the rage that still simmered under the surface. I had given her one last chance. She chose to keep taking. 2 weeks slipped by, not quietly, but with a kind of slow, deliberate pressure that forced me to keep moving. I worked. I organized evidence. I ate when I remembered. Sleep came in fragments. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of my old fridge and the constant turning of thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. It was a Thursday morning when the envelope arrived, not certified mail, no warning. Just a standard white letter slipped under my apartment door, as if it were a coupon or a grocery store flyer. It was a debt notice. I sat on the edge of my bed, peeled open the flap with trembling fingers, and unfolded the page. $30,000. Loaned under my name. Opened 8 months ago. A second sheet listed the email associated with the application. One I didn't recognize, but I knew the style. Isolda always had this polished way of presenting things, even fraud. The email was nearly identical to one she'd used for a gallery opening last year. I blinked at the letter, trying to process. Then I read the address tied to the loan, Charleston. Her condo. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I changed into clean clothes, grabbed my car keys, and headed out the door without brushing my hair. There wasn't time for vanity. I pulled into the parking lot of Heritage Bank downtown, again, and called Marjorie from my car. I had her direct line saved now. Marjorie Clark, she answered. It's Zena Quinn, I said. I need your help, again. She didn't sigh this time. Instead, she said, Come in. I'll clear a space. Inside the office, she scanned my documents, hands gliding over her keyboard like she was brushing dust from truth. I handed her the debt notice. She read it, then looked up at me. Same pattern? Yes. Same address, same voice in the application forms, same Zena Q styling. Marjorie leaned back. You're not the first person I've seen walk in here holding paperwork like this and wondering how their own name got weaponized. That line hit harder than I expected. I thought this was done, I said. I told her to stop, I warned her. She didn't take you seriously, Marjorie said. People like that never do, until someone else forces them to. That someone else, I realized, had to be me. I thanked her, gathered everything into a folder, and drove across town. Not home, not to Grandma's. This time, I went straight to the attorney's office I'd looked up 2 weeks earlier, but hadn't called. His name was David Herrera. His reviews were solid. He'd worked financial abuse cases before, mostly with elderly clients who'd been tricked by their own kids. I thought, maybe I finally belonged somewhere, in the mess of betrayed trust. The building sat on a quiet corner, all brick and ivy. The receptionist led me in after a 10-minute wait. David looked to be in his late 40s, with eyes that studied everything twice. "Ms. Quinn," he said, shaking my hand. "What brings you in?" I sat down and placed the folder on his desk. "This," I said. "Identity fraud. Financial abuse. And I know exactly who did it." He listened for 30 minutes without interrupting. When I showed him the power of attorney form with the forged signature, his brow lifted. When I played the voicemail from Grandma asking about the necklace, his lips tightened. When I handed over the debt notice, he leaned forward. "You've got a case," he said. "A strong one, especially if she used your name without informed consent, for financial gain." "She used it like a costume," I said quietly. "She wore it until it served her, then threw it back at me stained and shredded." He nodded. "We'll start with a formal filing, civil suit. If criminal charges follow, that's another layer. But this is actionable." I signed the paperwork that afternoon. My hands were steady, but my pulse raced. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a rough patch. It was theft, manipulation, and now, legal action. When I stepped out of the office and into the late afternoon sun, the weight didn't leave me, but it settled. I had done the thing I was never supposed to do in my family. I chose myself over silence. I walked down the sidewalk past a mother and her teenage daughter, laughing about something on their phone. Past a bookstore I couldn't afford to shop at when Isolde was spending thousands from my account. Past a bakery where I'd once stood outside, stomach growling, trying to decide between gas money or a muffin. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. I was focused. Isolde thought I wouldn't do it. She thought I'd bluff. She always believed she could out-talk, outshine, outlast me. But the thing about people like her, they mistake silence for surrender. They forget that some of us don't fight with volume. We fight with documentation, deadlines, and a steady hand. I had crossed the line now. Not in rebellion, but in reclamation. And I didn't intend to stop until every inch she stole was returned or burned. The lawsuit had barely settled into its first breath of motion when the invitation arrived in my inbox. Subject line: "A toast to love, family celebration." Attached was a glossy digital flyer, complete with pastel florals, cursive fonts, and my cousin Mallory's grinning engagement photo. Below it, in a less decorative font, "Formal attire requested, family expected." I stared at it for a full minute before deciding I would go. Not to be polite, not to smile through another round of fake hugs and disapproving glances, but because I refused to let my own blood erase me while clinking glasses and pretending the room wasn't splintered in half. On Saturday evening, I parked across the street from the event hall. An old renovated theater downtown turned into an overpriced venue with whitewashed brick and twinkle lights hanging from the rafters. It was already dark out, but the warmth in the air still clung to my skin. Inside my car, I glanced at my reflection in the visor mirror. My hair was neatly pulled back, my dress plain but sharp, a slate gray wraparound that didn't ask for attention but didn't blend into the background either, just like I intended. I stepped out and crossed the street, heels clicking against the pavement. The minute I entered, the buzz of laughter and string quartet music hit me all at once. Champagne flutes, polished marble floors, distant relatives smiling through practiced expressions. I passed a few nods, some stiff, some hesitant, all guarded. I walked past Aunt Miriam, who gave me a once-over and muttered, "Didn't think she'd show up." "Neither did I," someone else replied. I kept walking. The venue had been arranged in clusters, High tables, candles, clusters of white roses, trays of appetizers carried by waiters who looked too young to understand that families could turn into battlefields. And then I saw her. Isolde walked in 15 minutes after I arrived, in a fitted black dress that shimmered with subtle sequins. Her hair was curled just enough to look effortless. On her neck hung the emerald necklace, the one Grandma had intended for me. Of course, she greeted everyone like a politician, embracing people who whispered behind her back and laughing with those who feared being on her bad side. It wasn't long before she reached the center of the room. I felt the shift happen before I saw it. The subtle silence, the pause in conversation. The way heads turned, bodies rotated, glasses were gripped a little tighter. I felt it in my spine. Isolde raised her glass. "To Mallory and Daniel," she said, voice crystal clear, loud enough to echo against the chandelier. "May your love be honest, steady, and never tested by betrayal. Because let's be honest, some families don't survive lawsuits." The room froze. Then, nervous laughter bubbled up in scattered corners. A few relatives stared at their shoes. Mallory herself looked like she wanted to sink behind the cake display. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. But inside, I was burning. I didn't speak, not then. I just reached for a glass of water on the table behind me, sipped it slowly, and let the fire settle into resolve. A hand touched my arm. I turned. It was my mother. Her mouth was tight, her eyes sharp. "Outside," she said. We stepped onto the patio, where the air was thicker than inside, heavy with the scent of blooming magnolia and the sting of confrontation. She didn't wait. "Stop this, now." "Stop what?" I asked. "This lawsuit, this embarrassment. You think dragging your sister's name through court is going to get you what? A few dollars and a family that hates you?" "She dragged my name first," I said. "Through banks, through debt, through silence. She looked out for you. She looked out for herself." My mother stepped closer, voice low. "You think I haven't watched you fail over and over? Jobs, relationships, stability? She gave you cover. She kept you from collapsing completely. She stole from me. Then let it go. For the family, or you won't have one left." I laughed, sharp and sudden. "Is that a threat?" She didn't blink. "It's a reality. Keep this up, and you're not my daughter anymore." I stood there, looking at the woman who raised me, who bandaged scraped knees, who packed my school lunches, who now looked at me like I was a stranger, no, worse, like I was the problem. And I realized then, I had never been her daughter the way Isolde had. I had been the obligation, the quiet one, the one who didn't fit their mold. "Then I guess I never was," I said. I walked back inside, heels steady, heart pounding, but not from fear, from clarity. Back in the venue, people pretended to keep chatting. A few glanced my way, then looked away quickly. I found an empty chair near the back and sat down. Isolde caught my eye from across the room. She smirked. I didn't. They wanted me embarrassed. They wanted me to shrink. All they saw was a woman who didn't. By Friday morning, I hadn't told anyone what happened at the engagement party, not because I was protecting them, but because I was still digesting it. The sting of my mother's words hadn't dulled. Her threat, her betrayal, her refusal to see me as anything more than a complication, it stayed in my chest like a bruise you can't press but always feel. That's when Otis called. I was halfway through sorting case documents when the phone rang. His name lit up my screen like a memory I hadn't had time to process. "Otis?" I answered, unsure if I sounded surprised or relieved. His voice was low, a touch slower than usual. "I should have called earlier, Miss Zena." I sat down. "It's all right. What's going on?" He cleared his throat. "There's something I never said. I didn't think it was my place. But after all this noise in the family, and after what I saw at the last gathering, I don't think silence is loyalty anymore." I waited. "I saw them," he said. "Your mother and Isolde, back in 2021. They were in the garden, burning a stack of envelopes. One had your name on it." I only caught part of what they were saying, but I remember your mother saying, "She doesn't need to see these. It'll just confuse her." I closed my eyes. "I didn't understand what it meant then," he continued. "But now, I think they kept more from you than any of us knew. Would you be willing to tell Grandma? I asked. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am, he said. She deserves to hear it from someone who saw it. We arranged for Sunday dinner. Grandma had already invited everyone for a formal meal at her estate, a family reconciliation, she called it. But I knew it was more than that. She was drawing lines. She just hadn't finished writing names on either side yet. The evening came quickly. The estate glowed under the soft spring light, every window lit like a lighthouse warning ships they were getting too close to dangerous ground. I arrived early. Grandma greeted me at the door, offered no hug, just a quiet nod of acknowledgement. She looked tired, but not weak. If anything, she looked sharper than I'd ever seen her. Inside, the dining table stretched long and regal, dressed in silver flatware and china passed down through generations. Candles flickered in sconces. The air smelled of roasted chicken, rosemary, and unspoken truths. The guests trickled in. Graham and Vera arrived together, my father silent as always, my mother carrying a bottle of wine as though presentation could fix everything. Aunts and cousins followed, dressed well and smiling like this was just another Sunday. Isolde entered last, wearing cream, soft makeup, perfect posture, the necklace still around her neck like a trophy. She laughed when she greeted Grandma, brushing cheeks like nothing had shifted. Dinner started slow. Small talk, mumbled prayers, passing of plates. Then, just before the first bite, Grandma stood. Her voice was calm. Before we eat, I need a few words spoken. Truths, not pleasantries. The room quieted. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Zena, she said, turning toward me, would you tell them what Otis told you? Every pair of eyes landed on me. I didn't flinch. I stood and spoke plainly. Otis saw my mother and sister destroying letters addressed to me, gifts meant for me, and one of them told the other it was better if I didn't know. That's not speculation. That's not hearsay. That's fact. And this isn't the first time something meant for me went missing. Some family members gasped. Others leaned back, folded their arms, whispering already. Otis stepped into the room then. He'd waited just outside as planned. He walked to the center, removed his cap, and said, I saw what I saw. I've worked for this family 42 years. I've never said a word out of turn. But this needed to be said. Grandma turned toward Isolde. Is it true? Isolde looked stunned, but only for a moment. Otis is old. His memory isn't exactly… Don't, Grandma cut in. Isolde faltered. I was protecting her. Zena doesn't always take things well. You know that. Protecting her from birthday letters? Grandma asked. From a necklace? From kindness? It was complicated. No, Grandma said, voice steel now. You made it complicated, for convenience. You have taken my trust and sold it for your own comfort. You manipulated, you lied, and you twisted this family's image to serve yourself. No one moved. You are no longer part of this family, Grandma finished. Get out. Isolde's mouth parted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't speak. She turned to my mother, silent. Then to my father, still looking at his lap. She looked at me last. I held her gaze, and for the first time, she blinked first. Then she walked out, heels clicking against marble like the ticking of a clock that had finally run out. Dinner was silent after that. Plates were passed with mechanical hands. Conversations stayed low, awkward. But I didn't feel awkward. I felt clear. They had all seen it now. Heard it. No longer hearsay. No longer just Zena being dramatic. No longer something to sweep under the family rug. I sat straighter. I didn't reach for a glass. I didn't smile. I just breathed. It had been nearly 2 months since the night Grandma stood at the head of that long table and rewrote the family's story. Not with drama, not with fury, but with a single sentence. A quiet truth dropped into the middle of decades of noise. Since then, the house had fallen silent. Not Grandma's house. That space remained intact, steady, with her careful routines and unapologetic clarity. No, the house that went quiet was the one built out of illusion, the structure Isolde constructed with curated charm and cold ambition, supported by my mother's fearful silence and upheld by generations of whispered dismissals. That silence followed us everywhere, into the family thread that stopped updating, into the empty chairs at Sunday brunches, into the spaces where stories used to be told without scrutiny. And eventually, it followed me into the courthouse. It was a Monday morning in June when I sat across from a county clerk, her face pleasant but tired as she stamped the final documents. The sound of each seal hitting paper echoed louder than I expected. Each thud was a small rupture, peeling back years of confusion, hurt, and gaslighting. These weren't just papers. These were declarations. Official records, clean and unforgiving, confirming the restoration of what had been mine all along. My legal identity, my name, my credit, my financial autonomy, fully severed from the forged paperwork Isolde had filed years ago under the guise of help, protection, or whatever justification she'd invented at the time. All undone, all reclaimed. I watched the final seal imprint, crisp, unflinching, permanent. The clerk slid the file toward me. "That should do it, Miss Quinn." Miss Quinn. She had no idea how much that meant. "Thank you," I said, tucking the pages into the same folder I'd carried through every consultation, every late-night call, every frustrating Zoom meeting where I tried to untangle a narrative someone else had written using my name. Outside the courthouse, the sky was a soft gray. Not gloomy, just overcast, like the world had taken a breath. The breeze moved gently, brushing past me as I stepped out into the street. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed, fully, deeply, for the first time in what felt like years. This next chapter? It was mine. Not Grandma's, not Isolde's, not anyone else's. Mine. I had moved out of the studio apartment in the city shortly after the hearing. Too many ghosts in those walls. Unpaid utility bills, unanswered texts, late nights spent eating crackers on the floor while someone else used my credit to buy champagne and silk robes. The kind of place where even the shadows knew I didn't feel safe. My new place sat on the edge of the county, tucked behind a row of weather-worn duplexes and wildflower patches that bloomed without asking permission. Creaky floors, a narrow porch, a mailbox that stuck. But it was mine. Every square inch chosen, signed, and paid for under my own name. No more shared accounts, no more forged signatures, no more favors disguised as family loyalty. I unpacked slowly over the course of a week. No rush, no timelines. On the last day, I opened a box marked personal, the one I'd put off the longest. Inside, I found the picture frame. The one from that Easter brunch, the one that used to be empty. I had finally printed a new copy, one where I was actually in the frame, off to the side, caught mid-laugh, hair blowing across my face, blurry but real. Not polished, not posed, just proof that I had existed in that moment. I slid it into place and set it on the bookshelf beside my battered copy of Jane Eyre and a jar filled with sea glass from a trip I took alone years ago. Some things could be replaced, some things couldn't. There were letters from Grandma I'd never gotten, intercepted no doubt by Isolde. Birthdays passed without cards, phone calls that never came. Whole conversations that lived only in the minds of people who hadn't bothered to include me. And then, there was my mother. The version of her I used to believe in, the protector, the soft landing, the woman who would someday whisper, "I was wrong," in the stillness of morning. That version never existed, at least not for me. And yet, life has a way of surprising you. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Althea, quiet, composed, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. Her eyes were soft, but steady. "I won't stay long," she said. I stepped aside, and she entered like she always had, graceful, like her shoes didn't dare scuff the floor. She handed me the box. Inside was the emerald necklace, the real one, still nestled in its original velvet pouch, untouched by time or lies. "I never got to give it to you properly," she said. "I'm sorry for trusting the wrong people." I looked at her. "I'm not the same girl you meant it for." She smiled gently. "But you're still the right woman to wear it." We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. When she left, I sat on the couch and held the necklace in my hand, letting it catch the light from the window. It sparkled faintly, nothing loud, just present. Later that week, I received a card in the mail, no return address. But I knew the handwriting. Briar. Inside was a single message. I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't then. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't know if I would call, but I kept the card. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, no filters, no dramatic music playing in the background, just me, same eyes, same mouth, same woman who had once been overlooked by her own family. But this time, taller, straighter, intact, scarred. Yes, but scarred didn't mean broken. Scarred meant survived. I had applied for a full-time librarian position at the local branch the week before. They called me in for a second interview. I had changed the locks on my new place, set up the utilities under my own name, bought a new planner. It was the little things that felt like victory, not revenge, never revenge, reclamation, peace, dignity, narrative. They had taken from me, twisted my name, misused my identity, reshaped my story until I barely recognized it. But they hadn't broken me because I held on to the one thing they never saw coming, my voice, and this time I was using it. Some storms don't come from the sky, they come from within our own homes. What this story reminds us is that silence isn't always love, and loyalty doesn't mean letting yourself be mistreated. Sometimes, protecting what's right means standing alone, even against the people who raised you. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life revenge stories and emotional family journeys.
Hi, I'm Selene. And at my father's company grand opening, my name tag didn't just have my name, it labeled me as the family's burden. I stood there, surrounded by champagne glasses and forced smiles, while my family laughed at my expense. But that was just the beginning, because behind the wealth and prestige, behind the Moreau name, were lies, the kind that erased my mother, the kind that stole everything from me. And when I finally uncovered the truth, they didn't just try to silence me, they tried to destroy me. But here's the thing about people who think they can control you forever. They never expect you to fight back. I never wanted to come. When the invitation arrived, gilded edges, embossed lettering, an ostentatious display of Moreau wealth, I had every intention of throwing it in the trash. But then Isolde called. "Just show up, Selene," she had urged. "Let them see you're still standing." So here I was, standing outside Moreau Industries' grand new headquarters, staring at the towering glass facade that reflected Chicago's city lights like a beacon of power and privilege. My family's empire, a kingdom built on control, appearances, and a legacy that had no place for me. I exhaled, adjusting the sleek black dress I had chosen. Not too bold, not too understated, a balance of defiance and restraint. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I would do it on my terms. Stepping inside, I was immediately swallowed by the opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, the scent of expensive cologne and champagne filling the air. Conversations hummed, business deals, strategic alliances, power plays disguised as pleasantries. The Moreau way. And there he was, Magnus Moreau, my father. Surrounded by Chicago's elite, he laughed at something an investor said, his presence commanding yet effortlessly detached. He hadn't noticed me yet. Or maybe he had, and chose to pretend otherwise. Across the room, Vespera stood with Selene, the two of them an image of polished perfection. They were already watching me, their expressions unreadable, but their amusement palpable. I knew this wasn't a welcome. This was a spectacle. I squared my shoulders and walked in. I made it halfway across the ballroom before I saw it. A small, elegant table near the entrance, neatly arranged with name tags for the guests. An old trick of Vespera's. Networking, she called it. Control, I knew better. I skimmed the names absently at first. Magnus Moreau, CEO, Vespera Moreau, Moreau Charitable Foundation, Lucien Moreau, future successor, Celine Moreau, social icon. Then I saw mine, Solène Moreau, the family's burden. My breath caught, my fingers tightening instinctively. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some cruel joke. But then I heard it. Celine's laugh. I turned, and there she was, a flute of champagne in hand, eyes glinting with amusement. "Come on, Soli," she drawled, raising her glass. "Don't tell me you're offended by a little joke?" Vespera was beside her, ever the composed orchestrator of social cruelty. She tilted her head, her voice smooth as silk. "Networking events should be fun, dear. Don't take things so personally." A slow heat rose in my chest, but I refused to let it show. Not here, not now. I glanced around. Several guests had noticed, discreetly stealing glances in my direction. No one spoke, no one intervened. Because this was how it always was. A small, calculated humiliation, just subtle enough that if I reacted, I would look like the problem. I should have seen it coming. I inhaled slowly, fingers loosening around the name tag. My pulse thrummed in my ears, but I willed my expression into something unreadable. If they expected a scene, I wouldn't give them one. Instead, I smoothed the tag out, aligning it perfectly with the others on the table. Then, I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing server, turned toward the room, and smiled. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. The chatter around me buzzed, but my mind was elsewhere, locked on the name tag, the smirk on Celine's face, and the buried memories that had just resurfaced. I moved through the room like a ghost, present yet detached. Every polite smile, every murmured toast, every carefully curated exchange, it was all part of the act. This was a stage, and I was the only one who refused to play the role assigned to me. I needed air. Stepping toward the back of the venue, I let the cool evening breeze from the balcony wash over me. I should have left the moment I saw that name tag, but something held me here, something deeper than pride or defiance. Then I heard it. Strange how your mother just disappeared from the picture, isn't it? I froze. A man's voice, low but deliberate, carried over from a small circle of investors near the bar. He swirled his whiskey, his words casual, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. Magnus chuckled, his tone measured. "Life takes people in different directions." The investor smirked. "Right, and yet some disappear more thoroughly than others." Magnus's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. A warning. The conversation shifted. Laughter filled the space, but I barely heard it. I turned, my pulse quickening. Was my mother forced out? Was her absence not voluntary? Across the room, I caught sight of Isolde. She wasn't watching the investors. She was watching Magnus and Vespera, and the look in her eyes told me she knew something. The weight in my chest grew heavier. I needed answers. Slipping away from the crowd, I wandered down the hall where the offices were. I knew this building well. Before I had become an inconvenience, Moreau Industries was supposed to be my future too. Magnus's office door was slightly ajar. That wasn't like him. He never left things unsecured. Something told me to step inside. The room smelled like leather and expensive scotch. Bookshelves lined the walls, and his massive mahogany desk sat in the center, an altar to his authority. Everything was in perfect order. Everything except a single drawer, slightly open. I hesitated. Then, with a steadying breath, I reached for it. Inside, a stack of neatly arranged documents. But it wasn't the business reports that caught my eye. It was the envelope tucked between them. Yellowed with time, edges worn. My name was on it. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. Swallowing hard, I opened it. "Solène, I tried to reach you, but they never let me. I hope one day you find this." The words blurred as my vision swam. I gripped the letter tighter, forcing myself to read on. She had written about the divorce, about how Magnus and Vespera controlled everything, even her ability to see me, how they had twisted the narrative, ensuring that when she was gone, she would never be able to return. How she had never wanted to leave me behind. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I had spent years believing she had abandoned me, that she had walked away and never looked back. It was all a lie. A shadow fell over me. I turned sharply, heart pounding, only to find Isolde standing at the door. Her eyes flickered to the letter in my hands, and her expression softened. "You found it," she said quietly. The walls felt like they were closing in. "You knew?" She hesitated. "Not everything, but I had my suspicions." My stomach twisted. Rage, grief, betrayal, they all tangled together inside me. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Isolde sighed. "Because you weren't ready to hear it." She took a step closer, her voice low but firm. "And because they expect you to lose control. If you lash out now, they win. Understand?" I clenched my jaw. I did understand. But that didn't make it any easier. I carefully folded the letter, tucking it into my clutch. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Straightening my dress, I squared my shoulders and stepped back into the party, now seeing every smiling face for what it truly was, a mask hiding decades of lies. The sound of champagne glasses clinking filled the air, but all I could hear was my mother's words echoing in my mind. "They never let me reach you." I stood motionless in the ballroom, gripping my clutch tightly, my breathing measured. Around me, the event carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Laughter, polite conversations, the occasional flash of a camera. Every bit of it felt staged, rehearsed, artificial. I had spent years wondering why my mother had disappeared from my life, why I had been left behind. Now I knew the truth. And Magnus Moreau was standing just a few feet away, completely at ease, basking in the admiration of his peers, as if he hadn't orchestrated the biggest betrayal of my life. Then he raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice commanding the room's attention. "Tonight, we celebrate not only a milestone for Moreau Industries, but the legacy that we continue to build for the future." A murmur of anticipation swept through the crowd. I felt my pulse quicken. I knew my father well enough to recognize when he was about to make a move. "Strength, innovation, and leadership," Magnus continued, "are the foundation of our success, and that is why, tonight, I am proud to make it official. Lucien Moreau will be my successor, and my legacy will be entrusted to him alone." The applause was deafening. I felt my stomach drop. Vespera was watching me, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smile. Selene barely contained her smirk as she whispered something to a guest beside her. They had been waiting for this moment. Magnus hadn't even looked at me, not once. I was out. Publicly, undeniably, irreversibly cut off. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and forced a slow, steady breath. I had known, deep down, that there was never a future for me in this family. But seeing it confirmed in front of an entire room of strangers made the sting sharper, the weight of rejection heavier. But I wouldn't break here. I picked up a glass from a passing server and took a sip, barely tasting the champagne. My hands were steady, my expression unreadable. If they wanted me humiliated, they would be disappointed. I turned and walked out. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I needed to be away from the flashing lights, the whispers, the suffocating presence of Magnus and Vespera. My feet led me down the hallway, past the event staff, until I found myself in familiar territory. Magnus's office. I hesitated. Then I saw it. The drawer. The one I had left slightly ajar when I found my mother's letter. A rush of something, instinct, desperation, pushed me forward. If Magnus had hidden that letter, what else had he kept buried? I pulled the drawer open, rummaging through the neatly arranged files, financial statements, board meeting minutes, stock reports, until my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A separate folder, labeled Charitable Allocations, V. Moreau. I flipped it open, and what I found nearly made me gasp. Numbers, transfers, accounts. It took me seconds to realize what I was looking at. Undeniable proof that Moreau Industries had been laundering money through Vespera's so-called charity foundation. My entire body went cold. "Whatever you think you found," a voice drawled from the doorway, "it won't matter." I turned sharply, my heart pounding. Lucian leaned against the doorframe, his expression amused, but there was something in his eyes. A warning. I clutched the folder tighter. "Then you won't mind if I take a closer look, will you?" His smirk didn't waver. "Careful, Solange. You might not like what you find." I held his gaze, refusing to let him see any hint of doubt. "Neither will you." His jaw tightened for the briefest moment before he pushed off the doorframe. "You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." I exhaled slowly as he walked away. I didn't believe him, not anymore. For years, I had been the outsider in this family, the inconvenience, the burden. But as I stared down at the incriminating documents in my hands, I realized something. I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was a threat. I inhaled sharply, glancing at Isolde. If they were willing to lie to me about my own mother, how far would they go to protect their empire? The answer came the next morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating incessantly on my nightstand. The sharp, relentless buzz filled the silence of my apartment. My stomach twisted as I reached for it, already knowing they had made their move. The first thing I saw was my name. Everywhere. Moreau Heiress Spirals. A jealous daughter's attempt to sabotage her father's success. Entitled and bitter, Solange Moreau tries to stir family drama at gala. A distorted, carefully edited video clip from the event was attached to most of the articles. It showed me at the name tag table, gripping the humiliating label, my jaw tight. Then, a selective cut of me walking away from Magnus's speech, a moment that now looked like a petulant act of defiance rather than self-preservation. I scrolled further, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw her. Vespera, elegantly poised in a pre-recorded interview, her voice coated with false sympathy. "We only ever wanted the best for Solange, but she refuses to be part of this family. This has been difficult for all of us." My stomach twisted as the video cut to Selena, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. "We tried. We really did." And then Lucian, looking effortlessly composed. "It's sad to see someone spiral like this, but some people just don't know how to move forward." I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. They hadn't just disowned me. They were rewriting the story. And people were eating it up. The first call I answered was from Isolde. "Solange," she said, her voice clipped. "Turn on the TV." I had already seen enough online, but I grabbed the remote anyway. A news anchor was mid-sentence, my name scrolling in bold beneath her. Sources close to the Moreau family say Solange has struggled with her place in the family for years. Some speculate that financial motivations could be behind her recent behavior. My chest tightened. Financial motivations. "Isolde," I whispered. "What are they doing?" "They're making sure you have nothing left," she said, voice urgent. "This isn't just about reputation, Solange. It's about isolation. They've already started freezing accounts linked to your name, citing irregularities to justify it. And your industry contacts? They're pulling away. You're being blacklisted." I swallowed hard, pressing a hand to my temple. "Magnus and Vespera aren't just trying to ruin your name," she continued. "They're making sure you have nowhere to turn, and they won't stop here." A cold sense of dread settled in my gut. I had spent years trying to be indifferent to their cruelty, but this wasn't just cruelty anymore. This was war. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. For years, I had let them define me. I had let them make me small, insignificant, but they had underestimated me. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't just survive this. I would win. I reached for my phone and dialed Isolde. She answered on the first ring. "If they want a fight," I said, voice steady, "I'll give them one." I closed my laptop, my heart steady for the first time in years. It was time to show them exactly what a burden could do. I scrolled through the endless stream of articles, each one another carefully constructed lie. If they thought I would disappear, they were about to be very disappointed. The Moreaus had always been good at controlling narratives, at making sure the world only saw what they wanted it to see. But this time, they underestimated me. A sharp knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. My heart jumped before I reminded myself that I was safe, at least for now. I opened the door to find a small, unmarked envelope resting on my doormat. No return address. A chill ran down my spine. I picked it up cautiously, stepping back inside before peeling the flap open. My breath hitched the moment I saw the handwriting. My mother's. The ink had faded slightly, the paper worn at the edges, but there was no mistaking it. If you're reading this, it means they never let me reach you. I tried, Selene. I tried. My hands shook as I read on. She wrote about the divorce, how Magnus had orchestrated everything to ensure she had nothing, how he had blocked every attempt she made to contact me, spinning the story so that I would believe she had simply walked away, how she had been afraid. The Moreau name is built on lies, Selene. Money laundering, coercion, secrets buried beneath wealth and power. They don't let go of people like us. Be careful. My chest tightened as I reached the last lines. They won't let you go either. The words blurred as a wave of emotion crashed over me. Grief, fury, and something heavier, something colder. I clenched the letter in my hands. I had spent years feeling abandoned, resenting her for leaving, but she hadn't left me. She had been erased. A buzzing sound snapped me out of my thoughts. My phone. I answered without checking the caller ID. Selene. It was Isolde. Are you okay? I swallowed, my voice barely above a whisper. I got a letter from my mother. A pause. Then, softly, what did it say? I stared down at the pages in my hands, the truth unraveling before me. It said I was never supposed to find out. Hours later, I sat at my desk, the letter beside me, my fingers drumming against the surface. I knew the Moreaus operated in shadows, but my mother's warning confirmed what I had always suspected. There were things happening beneath the surface that were far worse than the world knew. And I needed proof. I reached for my laptop, logging into a secure server I hadn't touched in years. I still had contacts, people who specialized in uncovering the things that powerful families worked so hard to hide. I typed in a name. Selene Moreau. If Magnus and Vespera were planning their next move, Selene would be part of it. And I had a feeling her engagement wasn't the fairy tale she wanted people to believe. It didn't take long. A few messages, a few calls, and then the confirmation came through. Selene's fiancé was drowning in debt. The engagement was a business transaction, not a love story. A carefully crafted power move to secure Selene's position, orchestrated by Vespera herself. I clicked on Selene's latest social media post. True love, built on trust and honesty. My lips curled into a humorless smirk. I copied the files I had been sent, saving them to my encrypted drive. Selene had always thrived on the illusion of perfection. Let's see how she handled the truth. The call from Isolde came just before midnight. What are you planning to do? She asked, her voice cautious. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing against the letter from my mother. They took everything from me, Isolde, I murmured. It's time I take something back. I placed the letter beside the incriminating documents, my resolve hardening. If my mother warned me to be careful, it only meant one thing. I was closer to the truth than they ever wanted me to be. I stared at the names on the documents. Powerful men, untouchable by law, all connected to Moreau Industries. And I had proof. It should have felt like a victory, but I knew better. Because the Moreaus never just defended themselves. They attacked. The first sign came when I stepped into my office. The silence hit me before anything else. My assistant avoided my gaze. Conversations died when I passed. A few colleagues exchanged knowing glances before turning away entirely. I felt it in my gut. Something had shifted. I barely had time to set my bag down before my phone buzzed. An internal message. HR meeting. Immediately. I exhaled slowly, grabbed my notepad, and made my way down the hall. Inside, the head of HR sat stiffly across the table, a folder open in front of her. There have been concerns about your integrity, Selene. I kept my expression neutral. Concerns from whom? She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I assume this has nothing to do with my actual performance. I continued, leaning back. And everything to do with my last name. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We received allegations that confidential company data was leaked under your credentials. Given the nature of these accusations, we're putting you on immediate leave pending an internal review. A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. Lucian. This had his fingerprints all over it. You don't actually believe this, I said. The HR director didn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Selene. That told me everything I needed to know. I stormed into Lucian's office without knocking. He was sitting behind his desk, scrolling through his phone, utterly unbothered. You're trying to erase me, I said, slamming the door shut behind me. Lucian finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. You erased yourself the moment you decided to turn against this family. I clenched my fists at my sides. So this is your strategy? Cutting me off wasn't enough? You want to ruin my career too? He leaned back, smirking. You don't have a career without us, Selene. You never did. I felt my jaw tighten. You think I need you? I asked, voice dangerously even. You think I won't survive without the Moreau name? Lucian sighed dramatically. Selene, let's be honest. You were always the weak link. The moment you stepped out of line, you became disposable. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. If you wanted me to walk away, I said, you should have left me with something to lose. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Lucian's face. Uncertainty. And that was all I needed. That night, I met Isolde at a quiet corner cafe, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. She slid into the seat across from me, expression wary. What did they do? She asked. I handed her my suspension notice. She read it quickly, then exhaled through her nose. Lucian? I nodded. They think they've won, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. They don't realize I'm just getting started. Isolde studied me for a moment. What's your plan? I pulled out my phone and typed a single message to a journalist contact I hadn't spoken to in years. Then, I turned the screen toward her. A single file attachment, just enough to plant the first seed. Let's see how Lucian handles a taste of his own medicine, I murmured. The next morning, whispers began. Are the Moreaus hiding something? Why is there a discrepancy in their charity funds? Lucian Moreau, next in line for his father's empire, but at what cost? By midday, the first article had dropped. Lucian was already calling, but I ignored it. I smirked as I closed my laptop. Let them think I was weak. It would make my next move all the more devastating. Lucian had always been predictable, arrogant, reckless, and convinced of his own invincibility. That would be his downfall. But Magnus? He was a different beast entirely. When the formal invitation arrived, I wasn't surprised. A sleek envelope, thick cardstock, embossed lettering. Moreau Industries' signature brand of intimidation disguised as sophistication. It was an invitation to meet with him. Magnus Moreau didn't summon people unless it benefited him, which meant he had a problem. And that problem was me. I arrived at headquarters exactly on time. No earlier, no later. If he wanted to play power games, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of appearing eager. The assistant led me through the familiar hallways, my heels clicking against polished marble floors. Magnus was waiting in his office, seated behind an expansive desk, fingers steepled together in that calculated way of his. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. I didn't move. I prefer to stand. His mouth barely twitched. Suit yourself. Then, without preamble, he slid a document across the desk. This is my last act of generosity toward you, he said smoothly. I glanced down. A non-disclosure agreement, a financial settlement, enough money to disappear and start over. Silence had a price, and he had just named it. You think you can buy me? I asked, keeping my voice even. Magnus leaned back in his chair, unbothered. I think you can be reasonable. Take the money, Selene. Move on. I picked up the papers, skimming them. The sum was generous, life-changing for most people. But I wasn't most people. You're either with this family, Magnus said, or you're against it. I set the documents down carefully. Then I guess we both know where I stand. For the first time, his mask cracked, just for a fraction of a second. He had expected me to fold, to cut my losses and walk away. He still didn't understand. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was rewriting the rules. I turned and walked out, leaving the papers untouched on his desk. That night, something felt wrong the moment I reached my apartment door. The lock was intact, no signs of forced entry. But as I stepped inside, the air felt different. Then I noticed it. My belongings had been moved. Not stolen. Shifted. A glass was slightly out of place on the counter. My desk chair had been adjusted. A book I had left on the coffee table was turned the wrong way. Someone had been here. My stomach twisted. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a voice. Low, unfamiliar. Stop digging, Miss Moreau, or you'll end up just like her. The line went dead. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about Magnus anymore. I met Isolde in secret, my pulse still pounding from the call. She looked at me, her expression grim. Selene, if they feel threatened enough to do this, you need to leave. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edges of the incriminating documents. Leaving wasn't an option. Not anymore. I locked eyes with Isolde. No, I said. I'm going to finish this. The game had changed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I had spent years allowing my family to dictate the narrative, to paint me as the burden, the disappointment, the problem. But today, I was rewriting the story. I walked into the Moreau Industries investor meeting uninvited, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my presence drawing immediate attention. Eyes turned toward me, some in shock, others in curiosity. At the head of the room, Magnus sat in his usual seat of power, flanked by Vespera, Lucian, and Selene. His expression didn't change, but I saw the way his fingers curled slightly against the table. He had expected me to disappear. Instead, I had come to destroy him. I strode forward, my movements deliberate, and placed a stack of folders onto the long conference table. Good morning, I said, my voice carrying through the room. Before you proceed with today's agenda, I have something for you all. The silence was absolute. I turned to face the investors, some of the most powerful figures in the business world, watching as they reached for the files. Inside, they would find everything: proof of financial fraud, offshore accounts, falsified reports tied directly to Moreau Industries. For years, I continued, you've all believed in the illusion of Moreau Industries. Let me show you the truth. I pressed a button on the small remote in my hand. Behind me, a massive screen flickered to life. A series of documents appeared. Bank transfers, hidden transactions, numbers that didn't lie. The murmurs started immediately. Whispers, hushed conversations. I saw brows furrow, hands tightening around the pages. Then, Magnus stood abruptly. Selene, he said, his voice low and controlled. Enough! I met his gaze and held it. You don't get to decide that anymore. The reaction was immediate. Lucian lunged from his chair, knocking several folders from the table. You think this will change anything? He hissed, his face contorted with rage. Selene, ever the social strategist, shrank away from the cameras that were already flashing. She knew her own scandal would surface next. Her sham marriage, the financial deals behind it. There was no salvaging her public image now. Vespera didn't speak. She remained eerily still, watching me with sharp, calculating eyes. But for the first time, I saw something else in them, a flicker of uncertainty. She had spent her life controlling the Moreau narrative. She hadn't prepared for this. Magnus, however, remained calm. He exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the table in quiet rhythm before he spoke again. "You've made a mistake." His voice sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a certainty. I swallowed, but I refused to let him see any hesitation. "No, Father," I said, my voice unwavering. "I finally did something right." The room exploded into chaos. Investors demanded answers. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. The security team hesitated, unsure of who to listen to. Magnus had built his empire on control. I had just set it on fire. And as I turned to the reporters, microphone in hand, I delivered the final blow. "Now tell me, who's the real burden in this family?" The dust hadn't settled yet, but I already knew. Things would never be the same again. The Moreau name had once been untouchable, a legacy of power, wealth, and control. Now it was a scandal, unraveling piece by piece across national headlines. I watched from my apartment as the news played on the screen. The same anchors who once praised Magnus Moreau were now tearing him apart. Moreau Industries in freefall. CEO Magnus Moreau steps down amid financial fraud allegations. Lucien Moreau blacklisted from major business circles. Investors distance themselves. Celine Moreau's wedding canceled after fiancé's financial scandal surfaces. Vespera Moreau, the mastermind behind the Moreau Charitable Foundation. Has she cut a deal? I turned down the volume, leaning back against the couch. I should have felt victorious, but mostly I just felt free. A knock at my door broke the silence. I opened it to find Isolde, holding a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses in the other. She lifted an eyebrow. "Celebratory drink?" I stepped aside to let her in. "More like a farewell toast." We settled into the couch, the city lights flickering beyond my window. Isolde poured the wine, watching me carefully. "So?" she said, handing me a glass. "What now?" I exhaled slowly, letting the question sink in. For years, my life had been dictated by my last name, by the expectations, the power struggles, the endless fight to prove my worth. Now, for the first time, there was nothing standing in my way. A slow smile formed on my lips. "Now?" I said, raising my glass. "I live my life." Later that night, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the city below. This time, I wasn't looking for an escape. I wasn't searching for validation or wondering where I fit in. I had walked away, and I had won. The Moreaus would spend years picking up the pieces of their ruined empire, but I wouldn't be around to watch. I had no interest in their downfall, because they didn't matter anymore. I stepped back inside, pausing just before closing the door. The name tag from that night, the one that had called me the family's burden, sat on my desk. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Then, I smiled. I left it there, untouched. A reminder, because the truth was clear now. I was never the burden. They had always been mine. Before I step away from this story, I want to leave you with something to think about. For years, I believed that family was unbreakable, that no matter how deep the wounds, how cruel the betrayals, there was always a way back. But the truth is, not all families are meant to be held onto. Some are built on love and support. Others, they are built on control, obligation, and fear. Walking away wasn't easy. It took losing everything to realize that I was never the burden. They were. And if you've ever been in a place where you felt like you had to shrink yourself just to be accepted, let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your parents, not your siblings, not the people who expect you to play a role that makes their life easier while making yours unbearable. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to step away, to choose yourself. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away felt like the only way forward? Do you believe that family loyalty should be unconditional, Or do you think there's a point where enough is enough? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something real, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you want more stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.